Live from NVIT, Q101 presents the 2017 BC General Election Fraser-Nicola Candidates Roundtable Forum, moderated by Jamie Ballum.
Welcome back to the 2017 Q101 Fraser-Nicola Roundtables, part 2 of the question period. We're going to get right into it. We're starting with BC Liberal Party candidate Jackie Taggart. Your stance on the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion.
Well, the BC Liberals have been very clear that they are supportive of the Kinder Morgan expansion based on 5 conditions being met. Kinder Morgan is a federal pipeline project and has been approved through the federal government, but BC insisted on 5 conditions. Those conditions were the environmental assessment, were the land and sea response, were First Nations consultation, and were a benefit to British Columbia. We've been successful in having those met, and there will be a $1 billion fund available over the next 20 years to help communities with green projects and to support communities as they move forward on climate change.
Candidate Henshaw.
Thank you. I think this is a prime example of putting corporate interest before citizens. We have Kinder Morgan, who's donated generously to the BC Liberal Party, and I am on many levels surprised that there was not the vision and foresight. For one, the bitumen is a catastrophe waiting to happen if there's a spill. 2, a refinery of that product would bring exponential jobs, long-term, good-paying jobs to our communities and British Columbia. So I think this is the primary reason why the BC Liberals have to go, ladies and gentlemen, is that they are putting these corporate interests in every aspect before British Columbians. It's time. They need to be sitting in the penalty box for 4 years. Every decision, the jobs we're seeing, the logging for the past decade, those decisions have been shipped off to the U.S. Canfor, Interfort, Pattison, they've been starting up mills down there. Things like these, everything, like in every aspect, we've been seeing time and time again these decisions, poor decisions that have been focused on their large corporate donors, often from outside this country, head office in Beijing or in Houston, Texas, and not time. These folks go, we need new government. We need a new government that is fiscally responsible to rise up in this province. I'm asking for the people from every corner of this province.
Okay, and we've run out of time there. Candidate Henshaw. Candidate Green, please.
Thanks, Jamie. Our stand on the Kinder Morgan pipeline is unequivocal. We will do whatever we can to shut it down. The economics of mining and shipping bitumen is an economic taxpayer-subsidized train wreck, not to mention an environmental nightmare. Other than the construction jobs, the only economic benefactor of the Kinder Morgan expansion is Kinder Morgan. Ironically, Kinder Morgan met the Premier's 5 conditions immediately after making a $670,000 political donation to the current Liberal Party. Coincidence? I suppose. If this project goes to completion, there will be 30 tankers a month, triple the size of the ones currently using and sailing from the Port of Vancouver and through the Gulf Islands to Asian markets, creating a potential environmental apocalypse. Thank you.
And Candidate Lally.
Well, thank you. I mean, the rate at which the social and economic fabric has been destroyed by the BC Liberals, it makes me nostalgic for the social credit again. You know, the 5 conditions that the Liberal candidate talked about, well, she doesn't tell you that they were prearranged with the Conservatives before they put those in there so they can come out looking like heroes. And the fact of the matter is Christy Clark has abrogated her responsibility to British Columbians by sending all that, the permitting and everything over to the federal government. Look, the Liberals have had 4 years to build this. You don't see a shovel in the ground, and what's the guarantee it'll even get built in the next 4 years? What they won't tell you is there are very few, if any, local jobs available because the Liberals are actually bringing in hundreds of foreign workers to work on that, the pipeline, if it ever comes through. And one of the reasons they keep on talking about is to deflect from their own terrible record of job creation. 150 sawmills in this province have closed. 50,000 permanent family supporting jobs are gone because the Liberals' policy of having to listen to the boardrooms of the forest companies to actually turn over our timber to them, let them ship it out in the form of raw logs. And I think what we need to do is to start protecting jobs here first, like Talco, like I did when I spoke up. But there was complete silence from the Liberal benches as they were cheering in Kelowna when the timber...
Thank you, Harry. We're going to go on to our next question here, starting with BC Social Credit Party candidate Michael Henshaw. Michael, what benefits does your party's platform present to families with young children?
Well, we've got to end the tax and spend government. I hate the cliche, but it's the truth. A government that is not fiscally responsible, that does not deal with the bloated bureaucracy, the inefficiencies, the duplications in all ministries in the province. You cannot prosper when there's, again, the special interest money going where it should be, or not to where it shouldn't be, and not going where it's needed. With things like the carbon tax, for instance. Like what it's absolute. This is corporate welfare at the expense of the average British Columbian, the working class, people fixed incomes. We have a tax that penalizes people for heating their homes, driving their kids to school. A senior that has to go to the hospital. You look at your hydro bill. There's a carbon tax on that, and just policies time and time again that are made in the best interest of political donors at the expense of the average British Columbian. Every single decision, it's the responsibility of every single decision of a politician to be made for those who they're supposed to be representing. Thank you.
Candidate Green.
Thanks, Jamie. Quite simply, we're offering free daycare for children under 3, subsidized daycare for young families and single parents, a guaranteed livable income, healthy communities, and much more invested into education to the tune of $2.1 billion over the next 4 years. Thank you.
Candidate Lally.
You know, you start by actually providing good jobs, family supporting decent jobs, not the muck jobs that the Liberal candidate is touting at minimum wage and part-time. Our plan is to create 96,000 construction jobs by building schools, hospitals, roads, retrofitting our old hydro dams, rapid transit, as well as highways built directly through partnerships, 114,000 rental and social housing units, provide good health. So we're going to restore public services by creating 24/7 urgent care centers in BC and hire more doctors and nurses. Good education, I've already talked about that earlier. Affordability, and one of the ways to put more money into people's pocket is to freeze the skyrocketing BC hydro rates. Cancel the Liberals' planned 42% ICBC rate hike, and MSP premium, save up to $1,800 per family. Housing units, create more jobs and clean up the Liberal mess in housing, and to make sure that we increase the minimum wage by 2020 up to $15 an hour, and then tie it into inflation, so that small business can plan for it, knowing that it's maybe 15 or 20 cents per year that it's going to go up.
And finally, Candidate Taggart.
Thank you. Speaking of MSP, in our platform, we've committed to cut MSP by 50%, which would give those young families $900 a year. We also have a home partnership program for young families who are looking to own their own home. We will match their dollars that they've saved for their down payment to help them get over that hump often that makes the difference on whether they can buy a house or not. We're increasing 5,000 childcare spaces in the province, and we're also providing $90 million for operating expenses of those spaces so that it's affordable childcare. We have a balanced budget. We have quality education, and we have a province with a strong economy and opportunities. We created 220,000 jobs, and we want to move forward with job creation, fiscal responsibility, and opportunities for our young people.
Thank you. Next question, starting with BC Green Party candidate Arthur Green. Biosolids. You see the signs in the crowd here today. Some areas like Clinton, it's welcome, but not so much in the Nicola Valley. With the science that's out there right now, is land application appropriate?
Thanks, Jamie. Biosolids, or the better correct name for it, sewer sludge, is a very contentious issue. Throughout the region, it is especially not welcomed through the Nicola Valley and its 5 great First Nations, which have imposed its own moratorium on the spreading of sewer sludge through its territories. Even in Clinton, there has been many protests about this practice. Science tells us we should not be spreading toxic chemicals in regions of human and animal populations, nor should we be bringing it in contact with our agricultural foodstuffs. These are dangerous substances and should be landfilled until a proper method of dealing with it is observed, such as gasification and or pyrolysis. Thank you.
Candidate Lally.
Thank you. No, it's not good. So if it is so good, why don't they just use it in the Fraser Valley and the Okanagan instead of trying to ship it over here if they're trying to sell that to us? I mean, let's not forget, it was done secretly. And it was the smell after months that people realized that the sewer sludge was being dumped here in the Sunshine Valley. You know, I saw Chief Aaron Sam, a number of First Nations people. I see friends of the Nicola Valley that are here. They fought the good fight. I was there on the picket lines with him. I was in the media fighting the good fight alongside them. My right-hand person, Millie Mitchell, who you all know, died, gave her life fighting the establishment and the Liberal government on this. But the MLA was missing in action. She doesn't like being called invisible, but the visibility factor is very important for people. You got to show up when people need you, not just go visit a friendly crowd in a mining community or in a chamber of commerce, but stand up for the people who need you, like I did, like the First Nations did, like the people that were fighting the biosludge issue. They showed up, but the Liberal MLA didn't because she's supporting the party line. And we need somebody to fight on your behalf and take the issues. And sometimes it means taking on your own government. And I've done that. I've taken on the Liberals when they're wrong. I've taken on my party when they're wrong because I stand up for my constituents. And that's what is needed here, is to stand up for the constituents.
What's wrong? Thank you, Harry. Candidate Taggart.
Thank you very much. This has been a very, very important issue in the Nicola Valley. And when it came forward, I invited the Minister of Environment and Minister of Aboriginal Affairs to come and meet with our First Nations chiefs. We put together a process, and unfortunately we were unable to come to an agreement with the chiefs to move forward on that process, but the government moved forward anyway. We did a scientific review, we did land testing, and we did a review of the regulations. That work continues. And I have indicated to many people that work will continue for some time. We've talked to the cement industry about perhaps an alternative for them to use biosolids in their processing. I've talked to the UBCM and talked to the people who actually sign the contracts that for biosolids disposal. I think it's something we all need to continue to talk about and to take action on. Some places have said yes, bring biosolids to me, but we in the Nicola Valley have heard very loud and clear that there are concerns, and we'll continue to work with you to address those.
Candidate Henshaw.
Thank you. I was up a couple years ago fishing in Mammoth Lake, and I was just hiking up in the hills, and I saw these signs warning about don't eat anything in the area. I was like, what's this all about? And then I educated myself and found out that there's these biosolids are being spread everywhere up here. And, you know, this is a prime example of disregard for First Nations people, local citizens, your sports people, your hunters, your fishermen, the wildlife. When it's obviously there's warnings signs everywhere, and the people don't want it. Why are we doing this? We need to look at other options.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, starting with BC NDP party candidate Harry Lally. Crime. Here in Merritt, lately it seems like it's one incident after the other. What can be done at the provincial level to make Fraser-Nicola communities safer?
Well, you start off by giving our police forces the proper tools and the resources to fight crime, and also for community leaders as well. We need to actually have more education on crime prevention programs and also keeping our kids from getting into drugs and then also into gangs and mischief, and to make sure that they have activities provided through not only the community but through schools to stay. But studies tell you that there's a direct correlation between poverty and crime. That's one thing that government doesn't want to talk about. You solve the poverty issue, you'll find that when you solve that, you'll solve the crime issue or take a big chunk out of that. And the Liberal record actually in poverty reduction is a massive failure. We've had the highest poverty rates in the country for 11 years in a row. Child poverty rates are the highest in the country for 14 years in a row. Rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is shrinking. You start by increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2020, and you also create good-paying family-supporting jobs like the ones that I mentioned, the 96,000 that is in our platform. You can read about it, and not these part-time minimum wage jobs. There's good starter jobs, but they don't help you to actually, get your kid into recreation, into hockey and ballet and other activities that keep kids occupied from actually getting into criminal activity and to become prey to all of those gangs, drug dealers.
Thank you, Harry. Candidate Taggart.
Thank you very much. And I think that when we talk about crime and we talk about crime in local areas, it's critically important that we work with all the agencies that are appropriate, including the leadership at the local level. Provincially, we're committed to address mental health issues because we often hear that people who are most vulnerable and often creating problems in the community, there are mental health issues. And we've committed $45 million more mental health counseling and treatment dollars. I think that there is no simple solution. We look at the opioid crisis in our province, and we were the first province to declare a medical emergency. And we are working very hard with communities and with health authorities to address the issues that often are attached to crime, and we would work very hard with your local leadership.
Candidate Henschel.
Well, if we don't have integrity from our provincial government, and that's the leaders of our province, then how can we expect all these other ministries and agencies to follow suit? I think we need an overall respect for law enforcement officers and proper funding. The two primary roles of government is to have safe and quality infrastructure for citizens to travel and trade routes, and a general and the focus and emphasis on quality and protection of its citizens. So I think it's just a general respect for law enforcement, and I ask the people in this area, they have a hard job, and please respect the officers that are in our communities.
And finally, Candidate Green.
Thanks, Jamie. Safe streets and crime prevention is a growing problem throughout BC. We believe this is because as inflation outpaces good-paying jobs and educational needs increase, while social assistance from government agency decreases. Our challenged population loses hope and becomes ever more desperate. We've been creating the recipe. One thing we would like to do is create a livable income and put more money into social assistance programs and take the desperation out of people's lives. Desperate people make desperate decisions. We believe in hope versus exclusion and barriers. It's proven to be cheaper to look after our population than it is for them to live on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I read out the final question of the question period, we'd like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Inkla-Katma First Nation, and would also like to acknowledge the 5 founding bands of MVIT: Coldwater, Shakin, Nuwayich, Lower Nicola, and Upper Nicola. On that note, starting with BC Liberal Party candidate Jackie Taggart, thoughts on the province's relationship with First Nations throughout the riding now and ways that it can be improved.
As the MLA for Fraser-Nicola, we have a great many First Nations bands in our region. And one of the first things we did was reach out to meet with Chief and Council We've certainly been successful in doing that. First Nations issues are very, very close to me. I have First Nations grandchildren, and I really believe that the relationship is so very important. The respect is so very important. And I have worked hard to be hard on issues and soft on people. And though we may disagree at certain tables, we have worked with the 5 First Nations bands here on the Tourist Info Center. We've worked with Chief Harvey at Upper Nicola on the road and also on child welfare issues. We're continuing to support NVIT, and I advocate everywhere for the quality of education and the culture that is shared here at NVIT. Sometimes relationships go through ebbs and flows, but to me it is critically important that the door is always open. And so I believe that First Nations issues are incredibly important in our riding.
Candidate Henschel.
Role of government, and that they always need to remember, our politicians, is a respect and dignity for all people of all ages, children, youth, adults, and seniors, is essential for a prosperous society. I think we need to always keep that in mind, and there can't be bias. We have to treat all people throughout our society unbiasedly. In regards to land claims issues, I think the government needs to just continue to sit down at the table, find out what's best for all parties, and just spend the hard work in negotiations and mediation dealing with these issues. There needs to be support. I believe that the First Nations people want to prosper their communities. I've noticed around the province, areas like the Inkaneep, there's huge prosperity, and the provincial government has a responsibility to do the best to see that these First Nations bands and people can flourish in their community, and there needs to be a working together on all aspects. Thank you.
Candidate Green.
Thanks, Jamie. We believe our relationship with our First Nations Indigenous people should be a nation-to-nation relationship. Our current system of overseeing how they govern themselves is a self-serving method of control over the Indigenous population. We should be exempling models of governance that they could be using and offering to work with them in order they could set up their own governing bodies so as they could sit as equals on the world stage as a true worldly nation. We should also be offering them incentives for their own education models as well, do whatever that can be done to preserve their languages and culture. Thank you.
And finally, Candidate Lally.
Thank you. Don't take my word for it, but First Nations in this riding, in the 30 First Nations bands, will tell you that I'm the only non-Aboriginal person, federal or provincial politician, who not only goes to every single Indian band in the riding during election, but I visit in between elections on a regular basis. And this NVIT campus, on your behalf, I fought for it and got the $10 million to build this beautiful campus that you have built. And, when you look at some of the indicators, some of the worst indicators are on First Nation reserves, highest unemployment rate, some of the worst health outcomes, teenage pregnancies, suicide rates, all of that. First Nations will tell you they're not looking for a handout. They're looking for a handout. They just want justice. So, way before I even got into politics in 1991 at the provincial level, Mike Harcourt, when I was part of the NDP convention, passed a policy called a just and honorable settlement of the Indian land question. We were also the first party and the only party for several years when we adopted the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples, not because it was popular, but because it was the right thing to do. I was part of an NDP government that brought in the BC Treaty Commission with the federal government. Do you respect the spirit?
Thank you, Harry. And we're now going to take a short break. We're going to get one last chance to hear from the candidates. You're listening to the 2017 Q101 Fraser-Nicola Candidate Roundtable.